School's Computer Club initiative, promoting creativity, innovation and entrepreneurship.
Next person that will be speaking with us is Dr. Marsha Moorman. He's a science teacher in St. John Davidson Fine Arts Magnet School, Georgia in USA. So our presentation is going to be on how innovative you can be growing your garden. She's a scientist and she'll be speaking on growing your garden. You can see how innovative this 2022 SCCI International State Summit and Award is. We have diversified a lot, and we are looking at different areas that can make you to be innovative. So it is my pleasure to present to you Dr. Marsha J. Moorman. You are welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I am appreciative of the school's Computer Club initiative for this opportunity, and hopefully all participants will gain something from this. Am I able to share my screen?
Yes, you can share your screen, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, as was stated, I'm Dr. Marsha Moorman. I'm a science teacher at John S. Davidson Fine Arts Magnet School here in Georgia, USA. And I'm delighted to be able to talk to you about the topic, growing your garden. Now, this is very interactive, user-friendly. I'll try to mind the chat at the same time, but if you've got questions, please put them in the chat. And I'll try to look on and answer them either during the course of the presentation or at the end of it. But it's very user-friendly. So I'll give you a few moments to gather some of these items that you see on the screen, because I want to be respectful of your time and make sure that you get something out of the presentation. And one of the ways to do that is to have a thought box organizer with the items that you've collected. So I'll show you how to make that quickly, and then we'll begin with the information. So if you have just a sheet of paper, we'll fold it long ways. And then I folded mine just into 3 components. So I could have 6 boxes. So it should end up with 6 boxes. And what I'd like for you to do is on the left side of it, write down any thoughts or ideas that come to you as the presentation is going on. And then any collaborative partners that you may think of as we go along with the presentation. Just give me 1 second. All right, I've got to reboot the PowerPoint. My apologies. It stopped sharing just in the middle of it. This one is going to, oh, there we go. So I come from a long line of educators, and one of the things they say is, let people know what you're talking about before you say it, tell them what you're talking about, and then tell them what you said. So there are 3 takeaways from this presentation. Start with the end in mind. I know that's probably cliche, but it holds true. That if you know exactly what your end game is, then you can build your road to that and build various paths to that road, to that end game. Next, it's the journey that's important. So as scientists, I tell my students all the time, it's not so much that our answer has to be right. We learn along the process. And this is no different when we're trying to grow a garden. You learn things along the process. You don't always have to end up with a yield. It's nice if you do, but you learn along the process. And I believe the Montessori school of thought, follow the child. As long as they're interested, it will keep their attention and you'll be able to build on wherever they lead you. So the first one, it says, what's the end game? Well, when you're growing your garden, 3 things can happen. And you'll see this at near the end of the presentation. You'll actually have a garden to harvest by season's end. And the students will attain some personal life skills like communication, collaboration, critical thinking, knowing how to work together, knowing how to take constructive criticism, identifying problems, finding solutions to it. So things that not only will help them in school, but will help them in life. And of course, we do learn some science along the way. So my approach is the I-STEAM approach. And what's different is the I part of this way of teaching. It's intentionally integrating the content and process of science and or mathematics education with content and process of technology and or engineering education. And I include the A for art because I do work at a fine arts magnet school, and I do use both of that as well. And again, the key is the intentional planning of it. So it's not something that is just made up on the fly, that you really try to incorporate whatever the engineering technology or the art piece of it, because that's normally what would engage the students and have them wanting to learn more without feeling like they're learning. So our project that we had is called the Legacy Garden, and I'll explain how it got that name later on. But there was a 3-fold purpose in starting this 5 years ago. It was, of course, to incorporate the science, technology, engineering, art, and math approach to learning based on our standards that we have here in Georgia. And while I teach biology and physics, I was able to apply it to the different sciences. So I didn't limit myself that it only could work for life sciences or only could work for biology. As I said, once we engage them with the technology, engineering, or art part, you can find the connection. And because it's been planned out, you will certainly find the connection. Another purpose was to design a solution to a community problem. So our project centered around something that was happening in our community, something that the students could actually relate to. And in this instance, our community is being faced with food deserts and food insecurities. So it was applicable to not only what was going on in the community, but it was applicable to their lives as well. And they could see the direct adverse effects of not having those resources available. So we made that connection. And then we also wanted to do a kindness. So we wanted to, after we started the garden, then do a kindness and harvest our crops and take them to one of our local soup kitchens that serve those in need. So it was a full service process. So yes, we want to learn science, but we want to learn how to be good citizens in the process of it all, and promote some life skills as listed there: the creativity, the critical thinking, collaboration, perseverance, communication, self-control, and focus, just to name a few. So why gardening? It's simple. Gardening is easy, cost-effective. There's always, or could be, a tangible result at the end. No prior knowledge is needed. So I wasn't a gardener when we started this. We did it out of a need. And I'll talk more about the collaborations that helped us along the way. The intentional integration of the content. So how was that done? I focused on the A part of it. This picture here is from my students this year. So this was one of the first things that my students did. We hadn't touched any soil. They knew about the name of the garden, but we hadn't done any of that. What I asked them to do was to research what the soil should look like if you were to have a viable garden. And they got to do it from a variety of ways that they were able to do this. At the Fine Arts School, that was either through music, through spoken word, for the drama, musical instruments, voice, or dance, or art. So these are some of the samples that the students did this year, just on go ahead and research, what do you think the components of a viable garden should be? And they had to accordingly make a key legend. And you can see the variety of the talent and the creativity and how they interpreted what they had researched. They did this through a rubric. So I'm building the science as we go. And each of the parts of the iSteam product, there was a rubric to go with it. So it ran like a lab. This was a research lab. So they had to learn how to use the appropriate format, you know, in the lab part of it, as well as write it up with the 5 steps of the scientific method. And the creativity, you can see, showed through. Each of the different colors on each of the art pieces represented a different element, and that tied us to our periodic table of elements. And then they also had to do it in the right percentage for which vegetable they decided to grow. On the left, one of the very unique ones is the young lady who did the crochet. And she even showed that this representation would grow her carrot. In the middle, the young lady did food coloring for the rice. And she said she wanted to depict just a shovel of rice there. And then another young lady used just pop bottle tops and paper to show her depiction of what it was. So this is how we began. So it began at one of our inner city schools that sat right in a food desert. And that was the pull, that as trying to show this kindness, what could we do to help those that were in need? And so the students said, well, we could grow a garden. And initially in the top left, we did not have a garden on campus. So we had to collaborate with others in order to do that. But these students saw the need, they knew what they wanted to end with, growing this garden, harvesting the vegetables and things, making a salad is what they did down in the bottom left in front of the clients, and then going on to educate those clients in regard to the components of the vegetables, the elements are the calcium, the potassium, things that we hear all the time. And they had already just researched this and why it was good for growing that one. And now they're able to share that with somebody else. So they ended with the kindness, and then they also met the need. And this was these pictures here was the very first year that it happened. The first set of students had never touched soil before. They said, yes, we played in dirt, but we've never touched soil before. So that was an experience unto itself. Then the next set of students used their talents, and I'll show that later, how the art designs created the palettes with which we built our garden. And one of the things I want to mention is, I said earlier, gardening is inexpensive. So while our school gave us the grounds, we couldn't dig up the gravel. So we decided to use pallets. and there was a lumber yard right behind the school. I'm a firm believer that people want to help. They may not know how to help you, but they will help with their business. Not every answer will be yes, but you keep going past the no's. So the lumberyard said, we have pallets all the time and we can give you pallets. So we built an above ground garden with the pallets. At the end of that is when we then shared our knowledge on the right side of the top screen. The kids are now showing others how to transplant, how to take seedlings, you know, and how to do this for themselves. So it's nothing that has to be actually bought. You use your gifts of communication and collaborate with the businesses in order for them to help. So the first year it began, I knew nothing about gardening. The kids had the idea. So as the teacher, I want to make it happen for them. I sought out a collaboration with an entity known as Augusta Locally Grown. And that is their garden that you see the students working in. Remember, we didn't have one the first year. So the way the collaboration worked was because they had a full-fledged garden, and I wanted to continue to incorporate the science. So the kindness was there, but we needed to get the science in. I had the facilitator that you see in their boardroom lead the lessons. So every other week for 90 minutes, the students would go and get a lessons. It could have been on photosynthesis. It could have been on how the seedlings grow, the nutrients in the soil. So for the first 20 or 25 minutes, they needed to take notes on that. And then they actually had to go out and work that garden. And this occurred for an entire semester. And in one of the pictures, the young ladies, they've never tasted anything just straight from a garden because they're used to going to places with the processed food or just going to the grocer and getting it. And this was one of the days that they were tasting another life skill. It allows you to be curious and courageous. And I believe they were tasting mint, fresh mint. And anything in this lady's garden from Augusta Locally Grown, you could eat right off. So I was very big and appreciative of learning that you don't need any other fertilizers. Everything we do and continue to do now is just natural. So that the idea is you can go, you can pick it, and you can just eat right there. So after their lecture, whatever the topic was for the day, they would go out and do such. So on one of the particular days, she talked to them about composting and using the mulch. And as I said, most of these students had never put their hands in soil before. They grew up inner city, and that just wasn't a part of their lifestyle. If they lived in an apartment, there was no backyard. So they didn't know anything of that, but were willing to learn. We're willing to learn, and we're excited about it. So there was no issue of absenteeism on the students. Because we were representing our school, we went out with our school logo shirts and no issues with inattentiveness. So everything that you would want in that ideal student to stay engaged, this engaged them immensely. And they had full autonomy for this project. I was just there as their facilitator. So by the time we ended this semester in this first year, you see now the same lady from Augusta Locally Grown, Ms. Kim Hines. Then we harvested those items. It was kale, it was lettuce, it was onions, it was some of the mint. And right in front of the clients, as they were coming through to get their lunch for that day, they created the salad. And then the students went off and educated them about the nutrients in that salad that they had created and that they had grown. So by our second year, now the students are ready, and the collaboration did not end with Augusta Locally Grown, but that director happened to leave, and they were in a hybrid state, so we didn't have that collaboration. But the students felt they had learned enough that they could do this in our school proper. And in that particular school I was at, we had 2 courtyards, and this is exactly what it looked like before we started. So we weren't trying to disrupt anything. We wanted to just build on top of it, because the other option would have cost for more money, more manpower, and we didn't have any of that. So once they gave us the courtyard, that's when we decided, well, let's collaborate with the art teacher. Remember, I said we had a lumber yard right behind us, and they gave us the pallets. So to make this a real win-win, they had to attend sessions with the art teacher. And the art teacher at that time ran a double class for us. So she, in the front of the classroom, she had her regular art students, and my students came in the back of the classroom. They had to do this and do the art standards, which were knowing how to have an art statement, knowing how to have a theme, looking at your line, looking at your positioning, all the things that you would expect if you were taking the art portion of it. So we wanted to incorporate as many standards from many different disciplines as possible in order to keep the students engaged. So before they could ever get to the part of planting down at the end, they had to create their palette. And you saw the courtyard. Ours was going to be an above ground garden. So they needed to create their palette that they would put their plants on or their flowers on. And all of this occurred 2 weeks prior to that. They also had to present their theme or their palette to the art teacher for critique. What you see in the middle screen on the top row are the yellow and white boxes. So I also had a physics class. And as I said, this was for any science that I taught there. This was for all the students. So the physics class designed the seedling boxes for us. They had to figure out a design that would work. We were fortunate to have an indoor greenhouse, and we were going to start our seedlings there and then move them outside. So the physics class, using our 3D printer, and that's where we brought in the engineering part component of it, had to design our seedling boxes. And it went through many different stages to see which would be the right one, how many seeds they could put in there without it being too much of a growth, and how many holes were needed for the drainage. So the physics class, which were the upperclassmen, were working right alongside the biology class in order for this to be accomplished. And by the time they got all of those things together, they were able to go down, you see them now on that gravel area, and start the planting of their garden. Collaboration is key. So I knew nothing about gardening, but was fortunate that we had our media specialists who enjoyed gardening, and we had one of our administrators who also grew up on a farm in Jamaica, so naturally knew about gardening. They each had 2 different techniques, and we embraced both of those techniques and were willing to share. Our media specialist in that first, in the middle row, you'll see her for an entire day. She shut down the media, covered it with cloth on every table, brought in marigolds and the soil, and taught them her method of transplanting flowers. So while we wanted a garden for our vegetables and things of that, we also decided, excuse me, if people walked through our courtyard, which students could, we wanted it to look pretty. So she invested and said, well, I can teach you how to grow flowers and how to transplant them. And she did that for an entire session. And I want to say that for every session on the teacher end of it, the students did have to answer questions or take an assessment on it. So the process wasn't lost in just the act. Students did have to remember what was taught by the Augusta Locally Grown director, what was taught by the media specialist. And then on our left row, you can see one of our administrators during that time giving a lecture on how to transplant in a different method by using the seedlings. And they were active throughout the entire semester of these students learning this. On the right side, you can see the work that the students did on the art portion of it. And all of this overlapped to some degree, but I always start with the art, the technology, or the engineering part, just to get the students engaged and hooked and say, yes, I want to learn more. So I gave them plenty of breathing room to actually do that art and be in the art studio with the art teacher. So this didn't just happen in 1 or 2 sessions. It happened over the course of a couple of weeks. And that goes back to the intentional planning with iSTEAM, is that it's planned out, but flexible enough to follow the child. So those are some of the palettes that they created and were then put up in the garden. Always wanting to do one step more. So we had our palettes, we love that. We had plenty of them. Then we also had from the lumber yard, they said, well, we have some just plywood, different lengths of plywood. So we decided then, in addition to the pallets, we could just build us a border, as you see in the top left and in the middle pictures. We could build us some boxes and we could actually have soil created in the boxes. And so that's what we did. So by now, our garden is growing from one courtyard door. We're trying to go all the way down to the other end of the courtyard. And the way it was situated, it engaged the other students as well, because their classroom windows were right outside. And this was a multi-level school. So you could also see it from the second floor and going down the stairwell. And it was a means of sparking an interest. And if you did actually walk through the courtyard from one hallway to the next, then you could further experience it. Ours was the same as we had been taught. Everything was natural. So if we found we had ants or any kind of insects, then we just mix soap and water. That's what our administrator said. We're just going to use soap and water. As long as you don't put it on the vegetables or crops themselves and put it around, that'll take care of it. And it did take care of it. Now, did we have to repeat the process? Of course, we have to repeat the process, but that was all part of the learning. This particular group of students, so we have one group that did the art, the palette. Then the next group, you see those QR codes down there. This is what engaged my next set of students. I asked them to go and research about a particular vegetable. It could have been herbs, it could have been snap peas, it could have been bell peppers. And then once you've done all your research, you found out where they grow best, the type of nutrients they need in their soil, what season they grow best in, maybe what part of the world they go best in, how they taste, what happens when they cook them. Then I challenge them, tell me how it sounds. Tell me how it sounds. And so students had to create a musical composition. And in working with the band director, we got our musical standards and pulled them in so to make sure they use the right words when they describe the composition, either allegro, or andante, or whatever the words that were on the list. And we had them create a 2-minute musical composition. And then they transferred it to a QR code. This QR code was then placed by their vegetable. So when the visitors came, they could scan their phone and listen to the music that described how the students interpreted a snap bean. So maybe the snap bean used triangles for it. The collards here being strong and sturdy, and when you see them blowing in the wind, they blow real slow. That student used drums for that. And they did the tempo to the beat that you said, oh, if a vegetable had a sound, this is what I think it would sound like. And we shared that by using the QR codes in the garden. So by now we have done the legacy garden. We've done it a variety of ways. And I now transferred to the school I'm at currently, John S. Davidson Fine Arts Magnet. And the legacy garden continued. So this school is designed for the arts. visual, music, drama, just all of that. And I thought, what better way than a fine arts school that the talent then should be that much more, or even just as the other students. And it did not disappoint. So for these students, we did the same thing. We started with the above ground palettes. And then we also did a collaboration with our conservation district. And on the bottom screen, you see the students filling some grow bags. They wanted us to be the research scientists for their pollinator initiative. And we took on the task. Any collaboration is a great collaboration. In doing all of this, every student had a role. So every student, we depended on you to come to school. So there was never any tardiness, absenteeism, never any behavior issues, because that would mean you wouldn't be in class and you couldn't do your part. So every student had a role. We had students who were the weather people. So you'd have to give us a 10-day out on the weather, because even though class kept rolling on, someone had to go water our courtyard. We didn't have a water system. The students had to use just buckets. They had to take care of the whole water system. But we had a weather person who would tell us, okay, it will rain tomorrow. You don't have to water tomorrow, or this will occur, it may be too sunny. And even with our indoor garden, we had to make sure that everything was being monitored. We had students that were the data keepers. And every day or every 2 days, however it was set up for that team, you had to go and record what was happening. Was there growth? Were there more insects involved? Did you lose some plants? So everybody had a role that was an important role, and that challenged the students to come to school and participate. And the same with our research. Everybody took a hand in, there were 2 grow bags. We were making 2 distinctions between wildflowers and a different type of grass, and what type pollinators would come to that site. And we had those that kept up with the research book. So they would go out and sit there for 5 to 7 minutes, just making observations. And this continued throughout the semester. Even when we had to shut down due to the pandemic, what you see in the top right are the students' garden that I brought home. So I just put everything in my backyard. So when I still had to do live session, then they could see this is what's going on. They could ask the questions. They could say, well, I checked the weather. You won't have to go water tonight. Or how much growth can you tell me? Get a close-up of that picture so I can gauge what's going on with our bean plant. The process still continued. This is just some of the artwork that they did that I thought was the most creative. Everything was excellent, but this was some of the most creative. Down at the bottom is a mason jar of colored sand and the proportions of what the student felt would be for a viable garden. We have a mosaic done in the top right, and then one that's just made with felt, different sewing material and beads. And for every one, student needed to give a key legend. So I knew the brown beads represented calcium, and it had to be in the correct proportion. Well, in my garden, I saw that there's 20% calcium, 20% potassium, only 1% nitrogen. Everything had to be in the right proportion. So we're teaching the problem solving and discernment, for the students. We also were able to incorporate this in our drama. So it extended the learning. This was in 2021, so last year, the play just happened to be Seedful, and it talked about a young girl wanting to start a garden in her apartment complex to bring the community together. And the same as what the students were doing. We're trying to give a kindness to those in need because we live in that area of food desert and food insecurity. So we want to show that we can give this kindness. And they just happened to have a play that year that talked about exactly what we were doing. So how did we contribute to that? The vegetables that were grown in that play, the tomatoes, the onion, I want to say there may have been a rutabaga, and we grew that in our live garden. So by the time it was due for the play, we had the actual live vegetables for them to use as part of the play. The same students that were in the play were students that I taught. So it was a twofold way of not only enjoying the play, but it sinking in doubly the science and the kindness. So now you can see better how they connected it and how it all flows together. They research, they figure out what vegetable it is that they want, and they interpret it as they see fit. I'm gonna share one of the ones that was a dance. I put up her key legend, and if you are a dancer, you're familiar with those things. She described what dance move would represent the different elements at the percentage. So that means she's doing that at that number of moves, that number of times. And then her little synopsis of why she chose these elements for this particular vegetable, which is carrots. So I'll let you listen to this. So that was that young lady's interpretation of the soil that would be viable for carrots. They did this at the beginning of our study. So once they were engaged with whatever their art or their talent was, then the next process was easier. Learning about the periodic table, learning about states of matter, learning about physical changes, because they actually got to be a part of what it was. So all of this was done before we even put our hand into the soil. So how does it happen? It can happen in the classroom, it can happen school-wide. It just starts with an idea, and it can be any idea. Plan long-term, but do short-term types of things, so that there's always a goal done. And be flexible on both sides of it, be flexible. I always showcase the students at the end. We don't work this hard to not be showcased at the end. And for my students, a big showcase is bringing their parents or the community in, or people like their principal, just to see what is happening. We've either done live demonstrations or we've made videos. And one of the more unique ones was where our student took some of the herbs that we had grown and did a little cooking demonstration. And so that was part of our video presentation, but it's always a showcase at the end. Whether we yield something good or we don't yield anything, we always present at the end. And collaboration is key. As we had gone through, and I said to just jot down any kind of thoughts, ideas on the project or community issues that could be done, and then just any ideas on who can make this happen. 9 times out of 10, a business where that is their business, they will help. Or it could be someone in the school, the community that just likes doing something and they want to share. Just like with our media specialist, she just liked gardening. Our admin, he grew up on a farm, so sharing was just natural and just willingly to do so. I'm gonna go to the takeaways, and I have one last video, but it would take me off this screen to show you. So the takeaways we started with, start with the end in mind, start with what your goal is, and then you decide how you're gonna get there. It's the journey that makes it happen. It's learning the process along the way and just following what the students would like to do. And you can find it easy and accessible. All of the projects that we did were written up as lab projects because they were a project. We are in science, and they were accordingly graded according to such rubrics. So we use the scientific method with a title, a purpose, procedures, data observation, and a conclusion. But their artifacts were either their art or it was actually the vegetable. And I do have, you probably can see behind me, we started simple. So even we didn't purchase like nice pots or anything like that. Started simple with soil and a bean. And one of the nice things here in Georgia is a green bean will grow. A green bean will grow. And for most students, they've never seen anything grow. And to be able to take care of something and then find something in the end is huge. Is huge for them. We also do, when I incorporate the physics, we have a arrow garden. So we use our arrow garden in the wintertime, and this normally grows our herbs and like our mini tomatoes. And I use it when we talk about physics and talking with the electromagnetic spectrum and waves, because it uses a different type of light source. And we have 2, so we can do an actual comparison of if this one has more light source or that one has less, or we change one of the other variables, whether the food that's being given, but we also use that part of it. And I do want to save some time for if there's questions at the end, but I want to show one last snippet that if all else fails, and there's nothing to do at the end, one of the videos that my students like is this one. And I'll see if I can show just a small snippet of it. So if we haven't been successful successful, because sometimes we aren't successful, is one of the videos they look at the end of our class, and it shows that all the things that they may have gone through as far as lack of nutrients, nutrients added, but they can actually see the growth of the plant. So I would entertain any questions. I thank you so much for joining in, but if there are any questions, put in the chat and I'm happy to answer such.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Marsha Moorman. That was elaborative. That was spectacular. In fact, it is quite integrative. We love so much. It took so much of my attention to see how much collaboration that you have put into this job. I can see artists working. I can see physicists working. I can see people that love music working. This is really, really collaborative, and you have really depicted how science, tech, engineering, arts, and maths can really be used to impact life. In fact, everything that you are doing at your end is about green life. There's nothing artificial about what you are doing. Everything is all about the reality of nature, bringing nature to life. Now, children feeling sand, children feeling the vegetables. Now, it will help them to understand how they have to have healthy living, healthy eating. They know the source of what they are eating, and they know whether this thing is healthy or not. In fact, we have learned a lot from this growing your garden. We want to appreciate your efforts, your commitment, and your sacrifice. I know the students and the teachers around us, they will have one or two questions to ask. Do we have any question for Dr. Marsha? Do you have any question for her? Let me look at the charts. Oh, they're saying this is very interesting. They're saying thank you, ma, thank you, ma, and so on like that. So do we have any? Very welcome. Yeah, do we have any question? So if there is no question, I think she'll be sending the materials to our email, so we pass on to our students and teachers so that they can learn what you have actually brought together in implementing this. There's something that I also picked from what you said about ICE-team, intentionally integrating content and process of science and or mathematics education with content process of tech and so on like that. I was able to capture that. So maybe when I get your materials, I'll be able to capture more of what you have said. Thank you so much, Dr. Marsha Moorman. By the time we get to the first quarter of next year, we'll be inviting you again for this program. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I will send you that and the lab write-ups too, so the teachers can also have that to look at. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are glad. Let's give her a thumbs up before we end the session. Let's give her a thumbs up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So do have a nice day. So if you have the time tomorrow, we are going to have the grand finale of our program. The students will be having projects, and they'll be engaged with tasks that they have to come up with something that has to do with hackathon on coding and robotics, hackathon on animation and other things like that coming up at the University of Lagos. So we'll be running hybrid program tomorrow. Is going to be, we are going to broadcast it. We'll send you the link, and those of us that can attend physically too. So you are all cordially invited. So we'd like to draw the curtain to today's session. We want to appreciate every one of us for our time. We have learned, we have unlearned, and we have relearned. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. And Dr. Marsha, thank you so much. Yes, I can say there's okay, alexo.co.uk.
School's Computer Club Initiative, promoting creativity, innovation and entrepreneurship.